That's very sweet.
Have a seat.
I want to go with him.
No, you've got to come back with me. Have a seat, please.
Can you bring a tea out here? Is that possible?
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be stating the obvious to say this is Richard Gere. That was quite a transition. So, Richard, we've got some questions which have come in from Twitter and from the audience here, but let me start with...
Well, let me just say hello first. I mean, this is really wonderful. Hello, everybody. Are you having a good time here? Yeah, this is pretty great.
Let me ask you to talk a minute about Archbishop Tutu. I think we could all grasp he was an old friend. Where did you come across him?
You know, I think it was soon after he won the Nobel Peace Prize, because I met him. He had no idea who I was, not a clue, and it was one of those events that they were taking him from one thing to another for days and days, and I just met him briefly in that. The next time that I met him was, I think it was sometime around His Holiness was teaching, the Dalai Lama was teaching somewhere. The most time we spent together was actually, I was shooting a movie in South Africa, and we spent many hours together there. And that was really lovely, where there was time to consider and really talk about things. And I was deeply, deeply interested in the beginnings of his movement and how they were able to get on the right track and make something happen. And I want to know the mistakes, you know, the problems that came up, the issues, the interpersonal issues, the question of tactics and motivation, which are deeply important to me. Probably motivation more than anything else.
And I think that's the question we've got here in the hall and all around the world. A group of people, a lot of whom are at the beginning of their careers of social good. They're kicking off, they're doing new things, they're doing exciting things. Talk a little bit about the things that you've learned. What have you got right? What have you faced challenges with?
Well, you've got to start clearly with where you're at. I mean, who you are, what you have to offer, and I think you've got to be honest about that to yourself. Something the Dalai Lama continually says, and this is true of Buddhism, but it's also true of, I think, probably anything one wants to achieve. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is everything sits on the tip of our motivation. There's nothing in our lives that doesn't rest right on the tip of it. And if our motivation is small, if it's really within ourselves, if it's within our family and stops there, even our immediate community, if it stops there, it's a small motivation, and the results are going to be small. If the motivation is larger, if it's universal, if it can be universal, and we're able to achieve a connection with a universal drive for good, for service, for all these things, then of course the forces of the universe will buoy us up and we'll always be on the right track. Then it's not even a question of our own personal happiness or success. It's so much larger than that.
And what about those moments where you talk about motivation, those dark nights of the soul when you're pushing against a challenge, you've been pushing for a long time, there's not obvious progress? How do you keep motivation then?
You can't monitor it that way. All you can be sure about is your own motivation and a basic trust that things are going to work out. And I think that's what we all have to continually reacquaint ourselves with, is that the universe is a good place. And our minds essentially are good. The depth of who we are, our deep consciousness, is a really good place. And in the end, that will win. It doesn't mean it'll happen quickly. I say continually to friends of mine, and when I speak about nonviolent movements around the world, I say nonviolence is not quick, and it's not easy. It's probably the hardest thing that one can try to do, is achieve lasting change through nonviolence. But once you have achieved it through nonviolence, it's it. It's burned. It's finished. You are complete in that. There's no collateral damage that has to be fixed. And that's what's so deeply important about it. But you can't think of it in terms of time. The Dalai Lama's commitment to remain in this world as long as people suffer, he will remain too. We all have to, on some level, align ourselves with that kind of thinking, although we can't, certainly I can't, have a genuine motivation like that. But I certainly can align myself with that. And you get an enormous amount of internal power, but also external power comes along with that wants to see that kind of joy, transcendence, freedom, liberation, a sense of really feeling interconnectedness. Not as an intellectual exercise, but really feeling it, that deep, deep, deep connection that we all have, and that we are a universal family. Everything else is superficial. Everything else is, I often think the surface of things is unreliable. Maybe smell, taste, touch, think. We're bombarded with that, and that's the level of consciousness we normally live in. But that's the most unreliable part of who we are.
So let's talk about that challenge, which is one of the things, and I guess one of the criticisms of new media and social media is that you have this bombardment of information, that everything is about the short term, that everything is about being in the minute. I
have to say, by the way, I'm a total Luddite. I don't even know what a tweet is. So I'm the worst person to have sitting here right now. I don't know anything about this stuff.
I don't
have a Facebook. I have nothing. I don't know anything. I have the oldest phone. My wife.
I hope it's Ericsson.
I don't know what this is.
Very good.
That's
who's
sponsoring? Yes, Ericsson.
There we go. Thank you.
Will that pay for my car coming down here today? Yeah.
So I'm going to lead you straight to a question which came from Twitter, which leads on from where we were, which is, what role do you see more broadly in religion tying together with advocacy, particularly at a point when religion doesn't always think the same thing?
Yeah, I think, look, religion is a very difficult word to use. I think I usually say forget about religion. It's not an issue. We all respond to kindness. We all respond to love and affection, no matter what our religion is. There's not a creature on this planet that doesn't respond to kindness and love and to a smile. And you can see this over and over again in our lives. But there's no question that if one is dealing with social change, and is that the focus of what we're really dealing with here, organized religion is certainly a part of that. And some cultures it's more important than others. When we were working on AIDS issues in India, incredibly diverse in terms of religion. Now, if one is an Indian, you have basically a sense of egalitarian religious belief, and you more or less respect everyone's idea of spirituality. And obviously there are wars and there are problems that go on, but essentially there's a built-in respect. The power structures that change that I feel that I was able to give, and I started to conceptualize how to do this, was I think you can achieve nothing by yourself, that's for sure. To tie together all these different communities, communication is a desperately important one, and these social media component is way beyond what I ever could have conceived of when I started working this kind of thing. Television, radio were king, and in terms of the AIDS work that we started doing 10 years ago, that's where we went to. Today it would be clearly much more social media in terms of information, radical stigma change, raising money. I mean, all these issues are much more convenient and effective probably in these new media. But religion is a component, especially in a culture like India. And I've seen it elsewhere. It's clearly in this country. It's a very important factor that has to be included. Whether you agree with that religion or not, it's very close to people's hearts. And it very easily can be manipulated, obviously, in a very negative way. And to offer a connection to people that is outside of the usual language of religion so that they can be embraced as brothers and sisters with other like-thinking people who, again, basically know that you respond to love, kindness, compassion.
And how do we translate that into each of our lives? If you were to think about the one thing that the community of people here and watching this around the world, what is the one thing that we should all be thinking about as we think about living lives of doing social good?
There are two basic drives that I see in all creatures, whether I look at human beings or I look at insects. We all move towards our idea of happiness, whatever that may be. And we define that in radically different ways, but we move towards our idea of happiness and away from suffering or frustration or whatever you want to call that, away from problems. And you can see all of our actions based on that. If we take a step back from every situation and say, what the fuck was that about? Clearly, we were all motivated by something quite simple. And I think an understanding of that really takes away a lot of the issues. The ability to take a deep breath when the anger comes up or the frustration comes up or the sense of violence starts to manifest. The ability to take a breath right away and step back and remember how deeply connected we are and how much at root we are motivated by the same things. How we love our children and we want them to have all the opportunities they possibly can. We want a world without violence, without hatred, where everyone is taken care of, where people don't starve anymore, where people are not thrown in jail for no reason, where there is fairness and justice and all these things. And it's attainable, there's no question about it. But these personal issues that we have to overcome are obviously expressed in the outer world. And as we start to engage those real issues of what am I, why am I here? Is there a self? What is the nature of the self? Can I be found? This thing I'm protecting all the time, does it even exist? On what level does it exist? Is it totally relative? When you start to engage those, they become, beyond an intellectual exercise, they become quite emotional. And the root of that emotion is connection, it's love, it's compassion. So most of the work that I've always seen is to break down the obvious, the surface of things, and go back to the root drives of any human being. Mostly to the drives of children. I mean, you look at children, you know who we are. We have changed very little from the time that we were children. We've become habituated to negative ways of behaving and thinking, but the roots of who we are still there, just yearning towards love, connection, community.
And is there an argument, therefore, that the great thing about new and social media is it's exponentially increased the connectivity? That actually we are so much more connected. Does that make you optimistic? Are you going to argue?
Yeah, well, I'll take the other argument now. I don't know where these discussions have gone, but I think it's a dangerous point. I mean, I don't like to text. I still want to hear a human voice. I can read what's behind the words if I hear the voice. I don't know what's behind the word when I see it printed on my phone.
And that leaves you optimistic or leaves you pessimistic about?
It leaves me cautious.
Yeah.
I see this incredible spacey possibility of people immediately connecting with each other in this vast kind of way. Where is the net? Does the net, you can't point to the net. Where does it exist? It does. Same with the self. Where does the self exist? So on some really kind of interesting spacey existential level, I like the idea of the net. What I don't see is responsibility built into it. And so you're dealing with the same issues of how can I transform personally anger, hatred, resentment, jealousy, all these things, revenge. Is that helping me transform that, or does it give me more power to express those things? And that's the danger. His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about this quite often, and what the human mind has been able to technologically achieve is incredible, especially in the last century, last 10 years. But have we made those kind of leaps internally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically? I kind of doubt it. And if anything, we're probably masking the real issues of what we have to deal with.
Well, I think you've very neatly just articulated exactly what the Social Good Summit is all about and the questions we've just spent some days asking and the reason that we're so pleased to have you here on our stage for what was certainly an inspiring talk and set a challenge, I think, for us all as we think about the future. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Gere.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.